We've been spoiled here in the city of Pittsburgh and across western Pennsylvania, and we didn't even know it. From 1966 to the year 2000, on this set behind us, Fred Rogers produced nearly 1,000 episodes of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
And as everyone knows, he was a unique, one-of-a-kind Pittsburgher. Fred Rogers said that the space between the television and the viewer he considered as sacred space.
We're on location at the Senator John Heinz History Center in the Strip District, and in just a little bit, Andy Masich, the president, the CEO, and storyteller extraordinaire, will join us on set to take us on a guided tour of Mr. Rogers. Stay with us.
Pittsburgh's favorite Christian music plays here on Word FM every weekend. Call in your requests at 877-349-1015.
Miss the latest from John and Kathy? No worries. Catch the Ride Home with John and Kathy podcast, now streaming on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Google Play Music, and Stitcher.
Hey, thanks for being with us. Andy Masich is with us. Andy's the president, the CEO of the Heinz History Center, and we're on the set right now of the Fred Rogers exhibit at the History Center. Yeah. Andy, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's good to be with you, and I'm so glad you're here at the History Center.
I know, we came to your place for the first time.
Well, it's about time.
I know. We've been with you for maybe 5 years.
Yeah.
And you've always come to the studio.
I know it. They usually have these headphones on. They're in this little cramped booth. But now we're at the Heinz History Center, which is, in fact, the largest history museum in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and a proud affiliate of the Smithsonian.
Nice.
Very nice. So, Andy, what are we looking at here?
Well, you know, this is the original set from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. These sets were made in 1968.
Wow.
And some of them are put together with, like, baling wire and chewing gum and paper mache because they figured, what, do we have to get a year out of these?
I see.
You know, 18 months,
so they
maybe?
never thought, they had no idea.
33 years?
That it would,
no.
Okay.
They had no idea.
All right, so when I look back here, it looks like it could fall apart at any time.
It does look like it, but our curators have reassembled it exactly the way it was. So Mr. Rogers walked through that very wooden door, came down those 2 steps, sat on that bench right there, changed his shoes, put his jacket in that closet right there.
All those times.
I mean, this is the real deal. This is history.
This is Americana, right?
It really is.
Holy smokes.
You know, people come from all over the world, actually, to pay homage to Fred Rogers and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. They come here, and we're treating these objects as artifacts. And they'll see the tree of X the Owl.
Right.
They'll see the castle.
And Henrietta Pussycat.
Oh, don't forget Henrietta.
Right.
Wait, but do you know why they called X the Owl X?
No.
No, I don't know.
Do you know? It's because he escaped from the Pittsburgh Zoo.
Is that true, or did
That
you make
is
that up?
absolutely true. I would not make up
And
something
she was trying
like
to
that.
tell on him, but all she could say was meow, 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 meow.
That's right.
And so no one knew what she was saying.
He escaped. So we have King Friday the 13th's castle because he's the king of the neighborhood of make-believe, the land of make-believe. And we're in a special area of the History Center that's dedicated to neighborhoods. We have paintings done by Ron Donahue
Which are beautiful.
of 90 neighborhoods.
Really beautiful.
Yeah. And then we have ethnic neighborhoods of Pittsburgh. You can go to the Irish neighborhood, the Carpatho-Rusin neighborhood, the African-American neighborhood, and see artifacts from that community. So it's altogether fitting that Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood should be here. And yeah, it's magical, it's make-believe,
yes,
but here it is, tangible, so people can come in from all over the world, and I'll tell you, there are people with tears in their eyes.
I bet that's true.
Because they grew up with Mr. Rogers.
I did, yeah.
So, Andy, talk about what we're looking at here. I mean, it's amazing to see the original set. I mean, the door, it's an iconic piece of history.
And it's pretty flimsy, because they womped this up in the QED studios, and they really didn't expect it to last. And they were experimenting as they went because nobody had really done a kids show like this before. Fred starts out in 1954 when WQED actually begins. And the station manager, Dorothy Daniel, had a launch party for the cast and crew. And she gave each of them a special gift she had chosen for them. And she gave Fred a little puppet. It was a striped tiger. And he loved that puppet and used it on the very first episode of the Children's Corner show, they called it. And they had a clock that didn't have any hands on it. And so it was a cuckoo clock, and a bird was supposed to come out of the back and tell you, it's 3 o'clock. Well, he decided he would use this little striped tiger, whom he named Daniel after Dorothy Daniel.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And that's where Daniel Striped Tiger came from.
It all started there, and he stuck Daniel through the clock, and Daniel said what time it was. Because in the land of make-believe, you don't really need to know what time it is.
Sure.
So you got a tiger and a clock, he'll just tell you.
I see. So the show started locally in 1966, but then it went nationwide later?
Yeah, in 68, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood really takes on a life of its own, and people around the country started gravitating to it, because think about what America was like in 1968.
Wow.
I mean, the Tet Offensive in
so
Vietnam.
Martin Luther King.
Bobby
Kennedy.
I mean, it seemed like the world was coming apart at the seams. And so kids they didn't know everything that was going on, but they sensed their parents' anxiety and stress. And when they came home from school, they needed a calm, safe place. And they found that in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And so these sets are the home.
Homey.
Yeah.
Right.
For a whole generation, for multiple generations of American kids.
Yeah. Now, I feel like I was in the sweet spot of the Mr. Rogers audience. I grew up every single day loving Fred Rogers.
No kidding.
So when I came in and saw the set for the first time, I got a little choked up. It is such a sweet memory to be a little kid and to feel like he's inviting you into a very special secret time.
Wait a second, so I'm different.
That's going to be really safe.
Because when I see this, and I think of Eddie Murphy on Saturday Night Live, which is a whole different generational switch.
Yeah, a spoof on Mr. Rogers.
Right.
But, here, when Joanne Rogers came in and saw the set here, it was all very familiar to her. But then she saw our lifelike figure of Fred. And, we're the People Museum here at the Heinz History Center. So we have these lifelike representations of people from the past. And we have Mr. Rogers sitting here right next to us, sitting on the very bench that he sat on, tying on his sneakers. Remember, he always took off his street shoes and put on his sneakers.
My single favorite part.
And Joanne, gasped when she saw Fred sitting there, because they're pretty lifelike, these figures. But it reminds you how human he was, how ordinary in some ways he was, and yet how special he was to America. And think about this too, that sweater, that cardigan sweater that he's famous for. In the early years of the show, his mother knitted those sweaters.
No.
Yeah, they weren't machine made.
No
they were
kidding.
hand knitted.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, he was a regular guy.
That's so different from what TV is now.
Yeah,
it's hard. It
right.
feels like that would be 150 years ago.
Yeah, it does seem like a different era. But think about this. 1954, when WQED starts, well, that's the infancy of television.
Right.
A decade before, there wasn't any such thing as television. It grew very fast, and Fred Rogers was among the early pioneers of the medium. Radio had been around since the 1920s.
Sure.
But television is a post-World War II invention. And so the people who were doing the Children's Corner at WQED or Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, they were inventing
They were like pioneers,
things.
right.
Yeah. Let's try this. What if we did music? What if we had Speedy Delivery ride a bicycle onto the set? You know?
Okay, so speaking of.
Yeah.
Okay, so Speedy Delivery.
We have, you know, Mr. McFeely, Speedy Delivery, was named for Fred McFeely Rogers. Fred's mother's maiden name was McFeely, and that's why it's Mr. McFeely. So Mr. McFeely, David Newell, really couldn't ride a two-wheeler, you know? But Fred,
Stop it.
no, I swear, you can ask him, and Fred got him this bicycle, and he was going to be the postman, the delivery man. So he was supposed to ride into the set, and they built this beautiful oak tree where X the owl hooted.
And Henrietta Pussycat.
And Henrietta was there
Like,
too.
you always keep forgetting
Yeah,
her.
I know. And Mr. McFeely, Speedy Delivery, was supposed to come around the backside of the oak tree and stop on a mark and talk to Fred. Well, he was wobbling, you know, trying to steer this thing, and he crashed into the oak arm of the tree, broke it off. You know, this is paper mache and baling wire.
Didn't take much.
And Fred must have let loose with they spent a week making that tree. He probably let loose with a pshaw or something,
like
you know.
something really
yeah,
forceful.
really. And the next day, there was a three-wheeled bicycle on the set. And
We're not going to do that again.
Nope. They patched up the tree. I'll show you where they patched it. And they
they didn't make a new tree.
They
didn't have time or
cranked
money
it
for
up.
that.
They got out their chewing gum and put
Right.
it on there and repainted it. But David Newell told me this story. But those are the kinds of things. They were just kind of making it up as they went along. Right. But you know, it wasn't like it was all seat of the pants stuff too, because Fred wrote those songs. He was a talented composer and pianist. He was a poet. It took hours and hours, days and days to prepare scripts for this.
Really?
It isn't just, let's just make it up as we go.
Right.
Yeah, they were experimenting, but it was carefully calculated. And the themes they came up with to help kids with things like bullying and divorce and race and all these things and violence.
Danger, right.
Which were revolutionary conversations for the time.
They absolutely were, and they're still with us today. The kids still need that kind of help and advice and guidance.
Right.
But Fred was on the leading edge of this stuff, and he worked it into a program in such a way that kids didn't know they were learning life lessons. They just knew that they were having a good time in their friend and neighbor's neighborhood.
So, Andy, we talked a little earlier before you joined us about Fred thought that the space between him on one side of the camera and that space where the kids were watching as somehow sacred space. So this is sacred space. So what about that? The shows were not necessarily produced live. Everything, as you said, was very carefully choreographed and scripted. It wasn't as though these were produced for 30 minutes and put on the air. This was something that was very intentionally put together, psychologically, spiritually. The whole tone was very effective.
That's right. And, you know, this was his pulpit in a way. He was an ordained minister, went to the Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. And this was his flock, the people on the other side of the camera. He always, it seems to me, he saw those people. You know, there are people on television who read the news or who act, and I'm not sure that they really see those people on the other side of the camera. Fred somehow had the ability to get into our hearts and to see the people on the other side, just as, well, I think I see you.
There are a couple people.
Yeah.
I think it was his big philosophy, his worldview of life that made him able to do that. In fact, when he was graduating from the seminary, right, he was going to go to a church, and then they were like, wait a minute, maybe you're ordained, you should be ordained for something different.
The mission field is children's television.
Yeah. I think he did have a much bigger vision for the number of people he wanted to reach, the kind of people he wanted to reach. He wanted to reach children.
I see.
And make a difference. And to have a children's ministry, that was like a brand new idea in that time. We hear that term all the time.
Right, now it's
today.
regular, right?
Fred Rogers practically invented it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Andy, what we see here, a piece of the set, but the fact of the matter is Fred's legacy is so big and people want a piece of that. The estate in some ways is spread out over different people are holding this, right? There's a place in Latrobe where there's places of the museum.
Some of the puppets are there, but the main set pieces are here at the Heinz History Center. We have more in storage that we're conserving right now. And that's just a fancy name museum people use for restoring old things.
Yeah.
It's conserving them because we don't want to spruce them up and make them look new. We just want to preserve them as they are, with all their flaws and imperfections, but we don't want them to deteriorate.
I see.
So that's what we do here at the History Center. A great thing, though, has just occurred with Tom Hanks making a major motion picture about Fred Rogers.
There's this whole rejuvenation of excitement about Mr. Rogers.
It's fantastic.
Everyone wants to talk about him, which is why we're here.
And Hanks's team came here to the History Center.
Wow.
They measured every piece in this collection. I mean, down to the millimeter.
Really?
They matched up paint colors so exactly. I mean, it's a phenomenal amount of work. And so when you see that film, it's going to be almost indistinguishable from these original set pieces.
Oh, fabulous.
Wow, that's
So what do you say? Let's move on to a different place in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
We'll be back in just a second. Follow us along as Andy Masich takes us on a tour of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood.
How's this for a Christmas present? No mortgage or rent payments for an entire year. It could be yours if you're the winner of the Christmas Mortgage Miracle Sweepstakes, sponsored by Trinity Jewelers.
Andy Masich is with us. Andy is the president, the CEO of the Senator John Heinz History Center.
We're so excited you're here. Like, we're in his space. This is really fun. This is what he looks like.
Andy!
It is great for you guys to come out of the studio for a few minutes.
Yeah, they let us out.
To be with us regular people here at the Heinz History Center, the largest history museum in Pennsylvania and a proud affiliate of the Smithsonian Institution.
Outstanding. Andy, so show us what we're looking at here. I mean, this is the iconic tree on the set of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood.
This is X the Owl's tree, the old oak tree. Who else was in?
Henrietta Pussycat.
Huh.
Henrietta was in here.
Meow, 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 meow.
And remember, this is the tree that Speedy Delivery crashed into the first time he rode a two-wheeler on the set and then broke off this arm of the tree. And Fred was, oh my goodness, all that work down the drain. That's when he got Mr. McFeely, the three-wheeler.
I see.
That we all associate
Safety
with Speedy
first.
Delivery. Yeah.
Okay.
But, you know, in this very space here in the neighborhoods exhibit at the History Center, the press junket, the official press junket for Tom Hanks' new movie, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
Which comes out on the 22nd.
That's right. It's going to be right in this space. So there are going to be reporters from all over the world here. They'll be doing interviews with cast and crew, and they'll get a close-up look at the original sets from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood that were the inspiration for the sets that were in the movie.
And I bet they're going to be as surprised as I am. And I don't know if you can see where you are, those of you who are watching, but the tree looks like the three of us could have put it together.
Right.
You know,
Papier-mâché
I mean,
and-
it's not the kind of TV set we're used to seeing anymore.
It's fragile.
Yeah,
It
does
really
look
is.
fragile.
And that makes it all the more remarkable that it's survived 50 years when they figured, you know, we only need this for a season or so. So that's why people come from all over the world to see these things. They're iconic pieces of our past because we grew up with them.
And so, Andy, people talk about the Smithsonian essentially being America's attic. And in connection with the Smithsonian, the Senator John Heinz History Center, this is Pittsburgh's attic.
It really is. Matter of fact, this whole exhibit area focuses on the neighborhoods of Pittsburgh. So you can come in and see things associated with the ethnic communities that really made up Pittsburgh.
Right.
And that was one of the things that Fred talked about on his show. He said, you know, we're all different, but that's okay.
Right.
And when he put his feet in a bowl of water with an African American postman, he was saying, hey, look, there's nothing to be afraid of if you're with someone who looks different.
Right, and when I was a kid and saw that, that didn't seem like a big deal to me because Mr. Rogers normalized it. You know, now that I'm older and I look back, I think of what an amazing moment that was and how terrific it was that it was on television and that was something that he envisioned. But at the time, I just thought, oh, look, these are two friends.
Yeah.
This is what they do.
Nobody
That's
else
what was
was
so
talking
awesome. It was
about.
so good.
And he changed a generation. I mean, the kids like
Right,
you
right.
who grew up with him, they incorporated those values, those ideals into their lives.
So that's the responsibility of television that I feel like was lost with Mr. Rogers. I mean, do you think we still have that?
We need Mr. Rogers.
Well, you know, there's a Mr. Rogers company that makes Daniel Tiger cartoons, and a whole new generation is coming up with the values of Mr. Rogers, even though Mr. Rogers himself isn't there. His characters live on. And so that little Daniel Tiger puppet that Dorothy Daniel gave to Fred on the launch party of the first show, well, now he's taken on a new digital life, and kids who never saw Mr. Rogers, who don't know anything about the original show, are now channeling Mr. Rogers through Daniel Tiger.
Right, like New Mike's little boy, Dr. J, loves that show.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Right, even though Mike, when he was a kid, loved this show.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's travel in time to the land of make-believe.
The neighborhood of make-believe.
Let's move forward
Okay.
and we'll go see King Friday, okay? Here we go.
If you own an Amazon Echo, Echo Dot, Echo Plus, or any Alexa-controlled device, you can now set up the Alexa skills for Word FM on your device. Click here to see the easy-to-follow instructions.
Miss the latest from John and Kathy? No worries. Catch the Ride Home with John and Kathy podcast, now streaming on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Google Play Music, and Stitcher.
Andy Masich is with us. Andy's the president and the CEO of the Senator John Heinz History Center.
We love it here.
We sure do. It's fabulous. It's really Pittsburgh's attic. Any weird and strange and wonderful artifact about the city of Pittsburgh
You are going to
is right
find it here. It's freaky how many things. So let me just say that I grew up in an H.J. Heinz family. My mom and my dad met at Heinz. My aunt and uncle met at Heinz. When I walk through here, I feel like I'm at the company picnic
It's
from
the
like
DNA.
1980. You know, they have so much stuff here.
And this is the 150th anniversary, 2019,
Yeah.
1869, 150th anniversary of the H.J. Heinz Company.
Wow.
And we have
It's a terrific display. It's a
big
huge exhibit over there.
yeah.
I love it. I absolutely love it. But the reason we're here in the Mr. Rogers section is because on November 22nd, the Tom Hanks film A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood will premiere nationwide. And of course, the press will gather here the day before with Andy so that they can be here amongst all the original artifacts.
It really is a special setting for that press junket because the film company measured every set here and replicated it exactly.
So neat.
And so for the press people from around the world, they're going to be kind of in, well, I don't know, it's kind of hallowed ground
Sure,
here.
sure.
Mr. Rogers' neighborhoods,
right.
as close as you'll get to the real thing.
Okay, so speaking of hallowed ground, look where we are.
This is the real deal.
It's King Friday the 13th's castle. There's King Friday up there. But this is made of paper mache and cardboard and egg crates. And this was one of the greatest conservation challenges because you can see it's kind of sagging.
It's kind of like,
and-
I don't know if you can see, but it's like falling apart, kind of.
And it's pink and turquoise or
Right.
teal. I'm not sure what color that is.
But Andy, like you said, it wasn't meant for the decades. It
No.
was meant for the moment.
They felt like if we got a year out of this set, that would be great.
I see.
And so they kept cobbling it together. but our conservators have done a pretty good job stabilizing it, but it just can't be moved again. And right next to it are some of the original puppets,
right.
including Grandpère Tiger, the
Daniel Tiger's grandfather.
I think he's Daniel Tiger's grandfather, but he lived in the Eiffel Tower.
He was from the French side of the family.
Yeah, the French side of the family.
They're a little snooty.
We actually have the Eiffel Tower. It's undergoing conservation treatment
Is that right?
now. Yeah.
Okay, so if you come in here to the Senator John Heinz History Center, they have picture a little bit to the right of where we are, and you can see when it goes into the neighborhood of make-believe, there's the Eiffel Tower right there.
That's right. So we love being the home for Mr. Rogers' neighborhood here, and it's great that the film is coming out to introduce a new generation to
Well,
Fred Rogers.
that must make you feel special, because you're guarding all the original stuff that Fred Rogers put together in his head before it actually turned into what we see.
Right. I think that we are a repository for memories here at the History Center, and we want people to see themselves in the exhibits and in the artifacts that we have here, and that's why we have the neighborhoods of Pittsburgh. But when you get to Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, everybody was in that living room. Everybody was with King Friday the 13th. Everybody knew X the Owl. And so it's a homecoming when you come here.
So Andy, there are things that are right now being sort of cleaned a little bit or altered by the conservationists here. Talk to us about that. There's a group of people, this is their full-time job.
That's right. You know, we in the museum we have curators who kind of do the research, study, they become content experts. And then there are collections managers and registrars. They're the ones who keep track of everything. They know where everything is, and they oversee conservation. Conservators are the people who actually do the restoration work. They fix things, they repair things, but they don't try to make them look new again. They just try to stabilize them so they don't deteriorate. So it's okay for us to see a little age on things. Right now, we're in the same area where we're standing. There's George Washington's hair.
Whoa.
Actually, a little clump of his hair.
It's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
I could use some.
And what color was his hair?
Red, auburn.
Yeah,
Really?
It was a deep auburn
The white
color.
thing.
Yeah.
It was an act.
Yeah. And then right over there, we have 150-year-old pickles and 150-year-old ketchup that were found.
Not for sampling.
No, you can't sample it. And they're in a refrigerator because they were found 45 feet under a cornfield in Kansas City on board a Pittsburgh-built steamboat that sank in 1856.
Wow.
So because it was in an anaerobic environment, no oxygen down there, and a constant temperature of about 50 or 60 degrees, when they were excavated, we put them right into a refrigerator, and so you can see 150-year-old ketchup.
All
It doesn't
here at the
look
Heinz
good.
History.
The 150-year-old ketchup. It hasn't held up.
It separates a little bit,
shaky.
doesn't it?
It's a little shaky.
You know how you want to shake up your ketchup
you wanna
before you
shake that
just
for a long
throw
time.
it right on those fries? Yeah, I would do this for like 5 minutes.
All right, Andy, let's talk about Fred Rogers, the person.
Yeah.
I think that is the thing that interests John and I the most, is how he was able to take an impersonal medium like television and make it ultra personal. I mean, as a kid, I felt like he was my friend. I felt like I was his friend. I mean, there's just something magical about how he did that I've never seen in any other television personality. So, now you met Fred.
Yeah, I met Fred, and instantly my stress levels went down.
Is that right?
I mean, just being in his presence. He had a way of looking you in the eye and show you that he was really listening to you and that he cared about you. And you know, stress just fell away. But the people that he was most connected to were children. For some reason, he was like a kid whisperer.
Yes.
You know, he instantly related to kids. And if there were kids in a room with adults, he immediately left the adults and turned his attention to the kids.
So it wasn't just an act for TV, it was the real thing.
It wasn't an act. Matter of fact, when he was on the Oprah Winfrey show once, he asked, you know, are there going to be kids in the audience? And he was assured, no, there aren't going to be any kids. You know, this is an adult program. And he said, okay, I just wanted to make sure, because if there are kids present, you know, I'm going to talk to the kids. And it turned out that some moms brought kids, and they were in the front row, and Oprah started an interview with them, and they started out a regular kind of interview talking about adult things, and then he saw those kids in the front row, and he got up and went over to them, and the producers were saying, "Oh no, what's happening? You know, we're losing control. Should we go to commercial?" And he engaged those kids. It was compelling television.
It's Mr. Rogers being Mr. Rogers live.
Absolutely,
right?
and
Wow.
he was the real deal.
Yeah.
He wasn't acting.
Wow. Well,
he was relating to those kids, and Oprah's team didn't necessarily know how to cope with that.
But he didn't care either.
He didn't care. Those kids were the most important people in the room.
Wow. So in some ways, Fred sort of defies the celebrity age that we live in now. And of course, when you look at Fred and you read about Fred and you think about this was a good and holy man, in the age we live in now, we always want to turn things on their head.
We need to find out the hidden story,
Right.
that thing that they did years ago, so that we can find that they're
Exactly.
really hateable.
So people always say, well, tell us the dark and dirty side of Fred Rogers. And the fact of the matter is, there really wasn't the dark and dirty side. The urban myths of Fred are plentiful,
okay.
right?
So I'm at the mall last night, and I struck up a conversation about Fred Rogers with several people. I was sitting on a bench, and this woman turned to me, Andy, I wanted to ask you this, and she said, I heard Fred Rogers was covered with tattoos, but they covered them up on TV so
Come on.
so no one could know. Is that true?
You know, there's all kinds of urban legend and myth surrounding Fred Rogers.
Yes.
And because no one, or people just can't believe he was so honest,
Yes,
so
so
good,
right.
so sincere,
Yeah.
and so they started making up things about him. And with the advent of the internet, of course, all this stuff gets propagated, but was he a trained sniper with 13 kills? Was he
Wait,
a
is that a rumor?
It's a rumor. Was he a Navy SEAL? You know, trained to kill with his bare hands? You know, did he have tattoos all over his body? All of that's hooey. You know, it's
So no
make-believe.
tattoos, no sniper.
No, you know, death with his bare hands as a Navy SEAL. He was a swimmer, however. He swam
And a daily swimmer.
every day.
Yeah.
At the Pittsburgh Athletic Club, he would swim religiously, and he stayed in shape. And I don't know if you ever noticed it. He was proud that he was the same weight.
His same
you
weight.
know,
143.
Yeah.
Yep, right.
over 30 years. And he always looked trim and you know, light on his.
Now I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I also read that he suffered with obesity as a child.
I had heard that he was chubby as a kid,
Yeah.
and I think he suffered some bullying.
Yeah.
And that may have shaped his personality.
And his
character.
commitment to exercise, maybe, and his, you know, the importance of him being,
That's
you know,
right.
Yep.
thin and trim and
That's
healthy,
right.
and
That's right.
If anything, he was consistent, wasn't he? 143 throughout your adult life, that says an awful lot about the man.
was.
Now, I'm
It
sure
does.
Joanne Rogers could tell us some stories.
It's a marriage.
About Fred. But, you know, when I've talked to her, there's nothing that needs to be hidden. There's none of this fantastic stuff that you see on the internet.
Okay, Andy, so the movie premieres on the 22nd, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, but this exhibit at the Heinz History Center will be here for the foreseeable future.
That's right. It's a permanent installation. In fact, we're hoping to build a new wing that will expand on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and we'd love to recreate the whole set just as
wow.
it once
Yeah.
was. So that's our dream over the next 2 years.
Excellent. So take a moment, and as we leave, tell us all about the History Center and invite people to come on down.
Well, we do have 150,000 square feet of exhibits here. It is the largest history museum in Pennsylvania and a proud affiliate of the Smithsonian. Very nice.
and it's beautiful.
Well,
Beautiful
it's
place.
in an old ice warehouse, a
wonderful.
seven-story brick building that once stored ice that was cut on the northern lakes in the wintertime.
The Chautauqua Ice Company, right?
The Chautauqua Ice Company warehouse. And that's the ice that went into your ice box in the homes of Pittsburgh. But today, you can see the Western Pennsylvania Sports Museum. You can see large exhibit on the history of innovation here in Western Pennsylvania. You can learn about the French and Indian War. We have art galleries, a glass gallery. Pittsburgh's first industry was glass before it was iron or steel. We have a compelling exhibit called From Slavery to Freedom about the African American experience in Western Pennsylvania. And on this floor, you can learn more about the neighborhoods of Pittsburgh.
Which is terrific. It's a beautiful setup here.
I love it because grandparents come in with their grandkids and they say, "Where's our stuff? Where's our stuff?" And they mean our Irish stuff, our German stuff, our
Polish
Russian
stuff.
our Polish
Right.
stuff. And so we say,
There better be a pierogi in here somewhere.
it's over here. We have a giant pierogi in the Sports Museum. Yeah.
They have a giant
Oh
pierogi.
yeah. So
John and I are stopping at the pierogi on our way out.
and right now on the first floor in the McGuinn Gallery, we have A Very Merry Pittsburgh. It's an exhibit about the holiday traditions in Western Pennsylvania over the last 150 years.
Wow. Well, Andy, thanks an awful lot. I mean, we
It's
really
so
appreciate
good to be
it.
with you. It's good to be in your space.
Thanks for
once.
coming to my
Yeah,
house.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being with us. We've enjoyed our time with Andy
Yeah.
Masich, the president, the CEO of the Senator John Heinz History Center. And so join us here, won't you please? We'll see you next time on the radio.
The Ride Home with John and Kathy, a production of Salem Media Group.